Hello. Our topic today is about Dapper. So Dapper is a micro ORM that usually is used by developers to map their models in their application layer to the fields on their database. So what is Dapper? Dapper is a simple object mapper for the .NET platform. Owned the title King of Micro ORM. So it is, or ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. So basically, what it does is that it maps the object in your application layer to the fields on your tables in your database. Virtually as fast as using a raw ADA.NET data reader, but with shorter code and readable code on your project architecture. So an ORM is an object relational mapper which is responsible for mapping between database and programming language. So basically it will what the ORM does is that it maps the objects within your programming language or your application layer to your server side or your or the fields in your tables. So how does Dapper work? So Dapper works by creating an IDB connection. So basically that IDB connection will serve as a bridge between your database and your application. Next is write a query to perform CRUD operations. In this case, we will create stored procedures for our queries so that our queries will be separated from our application layer. Next is we will pass query as a parameter in execute method. So on our case, we will be passing um, custom classes that we will be creating that will replicate the values or fields that are available to our on our tables. So the first thing you have to do is to install the Dapper through the NuGet package. So later on I will demonstrate on how to install the Dapper on your NuGet package. So the basic method. So I would like to highlight that this Dapper topic is will only cater the basic methods that you will be using most of the time on your development phase. So the basic methods include execute and query. So we will talk about first the execute method. So the first is execute. Execute is an extension method which can be called from any object of type IDB connection. So basically the object of the IDB connection that you have created can call the execute method. So it can execute a command or multiple times and return the number of affected rows. So this method is usually used to execute number one, a stored procedure which contains the insert statement, update statement, and delete statement. Next is the query. The query method is an extension method which can be called from any object of type IDB connection. So same as the execute, it will be called from the object IDB connection. So it can execute a query and map the results. So basically, the result set of your query can be returned using the query method. So to demonstrate so basically that's it for Dapper. So basically, Dapper is your bridge from your connection, no, from your application to your database. So basically, what we usually do is that we create the application and then we integrate ADO.NET. So usually ADO.NET composes of multiple lines, and you need to create a connection object, an SQL command, and a SQL data reader or scalar. Those objects will the objects like reader or execute non-query can automatically be performed by execute and query. So now I will demonstrate on how to create a basic application using the Dapper ORM. So now we will click new project. So what my I would like to suggest a when I try to create a project, I usually separate the codes that will access the database and as well as the models of that specific application, and then I will separate also the user interface that will be accessing um, the methods that will be communicating to the database. So there will be three types of project within the solution. So the first project will be the repository. So the repository uh will do will do all the database communication based on the model or object. Next is the main application. So the main application has the user interface and the codes that will access the repository. And then lastly is the models. So the models contains all the classes that will be accessed by both main application application and repository. Now, why do we have to separate it like this? So for example, we will be creating on this example we will be creating a Windows Form application. So it will be created here. Now, what if you will be creating a separate application for a separate platform? Let's say for example you will create a web application, but as you can see, the user interface only changes, but the codes that will be accessing the database still the same. So if you will put the code that will access the database on your main application, and then we will remove the repository, what will happen is that you need to create as another project, and then you will code it again, or you will just copy paste it. So it will become a tedious work, and at the same time there will be no separation of labor, because for example a teammate can do all the repository stuff, and then a teammate can do all the model stuff, and then a teammate can also do the main application stuff. So later on you will see and you will realize how these three will jive with each other. Okay, so first we will create the uh, project. So usually what I do is that I usually give an acronym to a project. So let's say for example we want to create a database or an information about employees. So let's say for example, so we will go to our server, and then we will create a new database, and then we will call it employee DB. So example, we will call it employee DB. So we will create. Now after that, by the way, before we proceed, so I would like also to remind everyone that I am using an SQL server with a SQL user account and password. So usually what you have on your working computer is that you are only using the default instance without having the username and password. So for that, so what I mean is that when you disconnect and then you connect, you only have the Windows authentication enabled. So basically, you don't have a username and password for it to access the database, which is a bad practice. So in on on the real side, you need to create a specific username password for a specific database. So what you did is you need to select SQL Server Authentication, then you put the username and password. But on the default configuration of SQL, this is not enabled. So for you to do that, first is you need to right click on the actual server instance and then click go to properties. And then when you go to properties, you go to security. So when you go to security, the default value would be Windows authentication mode is selected. So you just need to select SQL Server and Windows authentication mode. Click that one and then press OK. So after pressing OK, you need to restart the instance of your server. So you need to, again to right click and then press restart. So after restarting, your server will restart. And then after that, you go to security, drill down to logins, and then right click new login. So on the new login, you just have to put the username. So let's say for example, hello, and then the SQL Server authentication password will be hello also, and then password will be hello also. Or let's say for example world, and then so I will just uncheck the password expiration, and then server roles. I will make this user all have their server role, and then user mapping, so that's fine. Securitable status is fine, then you press OK. So the password didn't match. I'll go back to general and then just put world and then world. Okay, so that's it. So when you try to disconnect the server, run it again. So I will press hello then world, so I can log in automatically to my server. So this case, your application can take advantage on this. So basically your connection string will have a username and password. So I'll just go back to my usual username and password. Okay, so now that's set. That's set up already. So we have also our database here per employee DB. So in our employee DB, so we will create a table. So the table would be, let's say for example, ID with the type varchar 50, and then name still varchar 50, and then position, and varchar 50. So we will save this one as, so that's employee DB. So we will put this employee table. So I'm putting tables and DB for you to for you not to be confused on the when we go to the actual coding. So okay, so that's the table. So we'll now go back to our project on Visual Studio. So here, so what I do is that I name the solution with the acronym of a specific project. So let's say for example, I'm creating an employee information system. So I will put it as EIS. So EIS stands for Employee Information System. So I will select Windows for application and then press OK. Now what I will do is that I will delete the EIS project, which is a Windows for application project. Click remove, and then I will add so basically I'm left with an EIS solution. So what I do is that I will put a dot on a specific project for me to know that it belongs to the EIS solution. So right click, add new project, and then first I will select the Windows Form application. So basically we will be following this one. We have repository, main application, and models. So first we will put EIS dot main application, main app. We will just put main app. Next is so since this one is the actual application, either what platform it is, so both of these two will become class library. class library, and then class library. So basically what class library is a library of classes, okay, that you can access so that your classes that caters the repository part and the model part will be isolated from your main application. Okay, so we have the AI as main app. Now we will need to create another project. So take note that I'm clicking the solution, not the project, the solution, because the solution can contain one or more projects. So right click, add new project, and then this time we will select a class library, and then we will call it eis.repository. Repository. And then another one, add new project, class library eis.models. Okay, so when I close all of this, so we will go to our Solution Explorer. So we have three projects: EIS main app, EIS models, and EIS repository. So basically, these are the three projects that we will work with. So first, we need to replicate the table that is present on our database. So we have employee table, and then when we press design, we have ID, name, and position. So that's ID, name, and position. So by the way, let me rename for to remove confusion. Let me rename this employee table to employee. Okay. So that you will not be confused when I try to create a model in the application layer. So which I will be doing next. So in the models, I will delete this default class, and then we will create add new class, and then we will put employee. Okay, so we will make it public so that the other projects here can access this specific class, and then we will create properties that will replicate the actual table. Okay, so first is ID, next is name, and then next is position. So the shortcut for creating a property will be prop, and then press tab twice, and then it will create a automatic code for that specific command that you have done. So first is ID will be string, name and position is string. So string ID, same, string name. So what after pressing the prop tab or tab two times, you first is what is highlighted is the type of or the data type of that specific variable property. So you will just type their string, and then you will press tab so that you will go to the name part of it. So we will change that into position. Okay, so that's done. So our class is done. So we have employee here for the models. Now we will go to the repository. So in our repository, this will serve as the this will serve as a bridge on your application to your database. So here we will implement the Dapper. So delete. Now the current version of Dapper only supports the .NET Framework 4.6 and above version. So you need to make sure that your repository or class library has the version 4.6 above. So properties, and then target framework is 4.5, so you will just select 4.6. Now what if you do not have 4.6 here, you only have 4.1? So you click install other frameworks, and then you will be directed to this link. So you'll just go below .NET Framework 4.6 developer pack, right click, download, and then install, and then restart your Android so Microsoft Visual Studio, and then .NET Framework 4.6 will appear here. So you need to select that one, and then target framework change, yes, and then you save. And then after saving, so now we will install the Dapper NuGet package. Right click, manage NuGet packages, and then in the NuGet.org, search Dapper. Okay, so Dapper, a high performance micro ORM supporting SQL Server, MySQL, SQLite, etc. So you just click install. So once you click install, a check icon will appear on top of the Dapper selection. So just close, and then another thing wherein you will know that Dapper is implemented to your project is when you drill down to your references, Dapper will appear there. So if there's an error, Dapper will not appear there, especially if you did not install the .NET Framework 4.6 above. So now Dapper is there. So the first thing we need to do is that we need to create, before we proceed on the implementation of the Dapper, we need to create a stored or later on. So we will just implement first the Dapper. Okay, so first is we will press right click, add, and then class. So when we go to class, so usually what I do is that I will separate the repositories based on the model that it is being implemented. So if I will create a repository for employees, I will put employee repo. Okay, so after that, so first is you need to make sure that the employee repo is on public. And then the second thing that you need to do is you make sure that your employee repo or the repository project can access this model project. So to do that, you need to add the reference of this model project to this repository project. So to do that, you press right reference, add reference, and then you need to select the projects, and then you will see their main app and models. You need to make sure that models is checked, and then okay, so that you can access the EIS.models. So what you will do is you just put it in the using state. You put a using statement for that. So that's EIS.models, so that when you want to call this class, you can call it directly to your employee repository. Okay, so next is so the first step for the implementation of Dapper is you need to make an instance of the IDB connection. But before you can do that, you need to make sure that you have a valid connection string. So the format of a valid connection string is that you need to make sure that the string is within your class. String connection string is equal to, okay, so the first one is the server, so the name of your server. So for the name of your server, basically you go to your SQL server, go to Object Explorer, and then you just need to click this one. So this one is your server. So right click properties, a ghost, so right click, copy, close, and then paste. Separated by semicolon, next will be the database name. So that's database equal to, then the name of your database. The name of the database is employeedb. And then next is the user ID. So the user ID will be the username and password that we have created when we made a configuration on our server. So I will put here soy, and then separate by semicolon for the password. That would be QWERTY. Okay, so that's my connection string. Next is we need to create an instance of the IDB connection. So we go private IDB connection. Now, when you try to put the IDB connection type, it will result for in on a error. So what you will do is just hover your mouse to this um ellipses, and then oops, so it's not showing. Yes, because we did not put the using statement on the Dapper. So you put using Dapper, and then so the IDB connection should be generated. So IDB connection, the name of your IDB connection instance, and then we'll put get set for us to get the values for this specific instance of an object. So what's happening here is the IDB connection is the casing is wrong. So the IDB, the B must be small letter, and then so that it will work, and then using system data, so that the Dapper so system data can detect the IDB connection type. So next, so after that, so you need to make sure that the IDB connection has the valid connection string. So to do that, what will happen is that when you try to call the methods within this repository or this class, you will be creating a new instance of it. So when you as you all know, on your object-oriented programming classes, when you try to create an instance of a class, you will be calling its constructor. So the default constructor will do nothing, but on this case we need to give it an action so that our IDB connection can have a valid connection string. So to do that, public name of the constructor method, which is the same name of your class, then just put open and close parenthesis and then curly brackets. So here we will just put con, which is the instance of our IDB connection, is equal to new SQL connection, and then open parenthesis your connection string. Okay, so and then import the SQL connection using the system.data.sql client, so that you will have the access for the SQL connection. Next is, now we will be creating our first method, which has the execute method on the Dapper. So first is we will create a void or on our on a method that will return nothing but inserts a data to your database or the table. So first is you need to make sure that it will be public void for a method that will return nothing, and then so for example add employee, and then on the add employee, of course we need a parameter for this method. So the parameter would be employee. This employee is this one, an instance of this one, so employee emp, and then so here we will we need to make sure that we will execute the execute command of Dapper. So to do that, we will press this .con, which is the instance of the IDB connection, and then execute, and then open parenthesis the name of your stored procedure, insert employee, comma, parameter, which is your emp, this one, then comma, command type. So command type will be, we need to make sure that the execution will be of type command type will be stored procedure. So command type, and then command type dot stored procedure, to let the IDV connection know that we are not passing the actual query but rather use a stored procedure. Now this will not work because we do not have a insert employee stored procedure, so we'll need to go back to our server and create a stored procedure here. So as you all know, the syntax for creating a stored procedure will be create procedure and then procedure name. So let's say for example insert employee, because that's the string that we have passed here, insert employee. So yeah, and then open parenthesis parameter, and then as begin, then end. So we will pass parameters here, but later, because I will teach you maybe a tip on how to generate or how not to always create basic SQL queries like insert, update, select, etc. Because the SQL, the management studio can automatically generate that for you as long as you have selected a table. But it's also a good practice for you to perform basic SQL syntax. But for this type of projects, I will just perform the shortcut one. So when I try to navigate to the table, I will right click on the table and then script table as, and then insert. So copy to clipboard. So when I try to put this here, so of course I automatically have a insert into statement for the employee table. So what I will do is I will just clean up this insert into statement. So I will just put these guys here because the syntax for my store procedure will be open parenthesis, and then I will just put a at value, then remove the comma, then put at value on the name also, and then remove the comma, and then put an at position, remove the comma, remove the comma, sorry. Okay, so that's it. And then the values, I will just put at ID, comma, at name, comma, at position. And then I'm just gonna arrange my query for me to know the errors within my store procedure. So they are giving me an error here. Why? Because I have duplicate comma. So again, try to format, then that's good. Okay, so that's done. So of course, create procedure, and then the name of your store procedure, the parameters that you will be accepting, and then begin as, and then begin, and then in the insert statements, on the insert statement we will insert the ID, the name, and the position of this table. ID, name, and position, and then we will put the values at ID, at name, at position. So you have noticed again, the employee class has the same fields, the same with our table. So here, as you have noticed here in our insert employee, we did not specify the fields that we will be passing, but rather we submit the whole employee class on the execute method. So what the ORM does is that it will map whatever the equivalent of the model to the fields in the table. So we will just execute this one for the stored procedure to be created. So we will verify that by refreshing the programmability option, and then stored procedure, and then there is our insert employee. So now we will go back to our application. So we have already created our add employee. So now what what is left to be done is implement it in our main application. So again, so for our main application to work, we need to make sure that the references includes our EIS models and the same as the repository. Those two. Okay. So we will check for our, and then we need to make sure that our EIS main application also uses the 4.6 .NET framework for it to have a compatible versions both on our employee repo. Okay, so this is the form 1. So the form 1, so I will not be creating any more forms because this is just a demonstration. So basically this app will only do a simple CRUD operations for this specific table. So first we will create a basic text boxes. So I will search text box, and then for the ID, name, and okay. So of course it's a good practice to name your text boxes. So this will be text box ID, and then text box name, and then text box position. So I'll put labels for user interface sake. Label, and label. So this will be ID, and this will be name, and then this will be position. Okay, so that's done. Then of course we need a button for it to execute button. Simple button, no button, regular button. Then we'll press save, and we put save. Okay, so my coordinate design will be this one. So I'll put a group, oh no, group box, then I'll put employee details, and then I will put all of these guys on my group box. Okay, then put it here, and then I will put another. So I will just gonna finish the UI sake. So this will be a group box for employee list. Then I will put a grid for the data grid view for this employee list. Okay, done. So I will just name this one to data grid view employee. Okay, so we need to make sure that when we click the save button, the data will be passed to this table. Tables, right click, edit top 500. So basically, as you can see, there are no values. Okay, so we will navigate to our save button. So now the most important thing to do is that you need to make sure that you have an instance of the employee repo. So usually when you are in the form, you will be using most of the time the employee repo. So you will not put it in a specific method, but rather put it in top as a member of the class form. So I'll put here employee repo. Emp repo is equal to new employee repo. So basically I'm just creating a new instance of employee repo. So of course it's not it will be error because we are not putting a using statement on the EIS repository. So you can solve that through navigating to this blue guy here, and then there, solve. So after putting the employee repo, now you can call the emp repo.addEmployee. See this? But of course, add employee requires a models employee emp. So you need to create an instance for the employee. This one, emp equal to new employee. Of course, that will be still an error. So we will need to import the EIS.models. This one. So now we will just gonna assign the text boxes to our employee instance. So we'll put emp dot id is equal to text box id dot text, and then emp dot name is equal to text box name dot text, and emp dot position is equal to text box position dot text. And then of course we will just gonna call the emp repo dot add employee, and then we will pass this guy here, emp. So what it will do, what this will do is that the employee, then the values within these text boxes will be passed to here, and then calling the add employee, and then it will execute the insert employee. So hopefully when we run this program, the values that we have added to the text boxes will be inserted in this table because of this store procedure. Okay, so before you click start, you need to make sure that your application is set as the startup project for this solution, because there are times that the startup project that are selected is either the models or the repository. Okay, to start a project and then click run. Okay, so we will put ID as, for example, 1, and then name is Jason Sarabia, and then position is faculty, or sorry, it's instructor. Save. So nothing happens, and then but when we try to go to our table and click execute, so there will be a value here. So we will put a breakpoint to our forms so that we will know what will happen. Okay, so I will put again another value. So this is 2, and then Maria Dara Sakin Woo. Then, so for example, I put Dean. Save. So now we went to the button 1 underscore click. So we have created an instance of the employee, and then the imp IDs, if you have noticed, ID name and positions are empty or null. So when we navigate to the assignment, you can see that the values on the text boxes are assigned directly to the ID name and position of the instance of the employee. So when we hover to the emp, the ID now is 2. When we step over again, the name now will be Maria Darasakin Wu, but the position is still null, and then when we press step over again, and the position will be Dean. So for the employee, that will be passed the add employee to Maria Darasakin Wu and Dean. So we will press step into so that we will go inside the add employee. So when we go to the add employee and we hover our mouse to the parameter, as you have noticed, when we expand the imp, we have ID, name, position. We have to Maria Darzakinu and Dean, which are passed from here. And then this imp will be passed as a parameter to our .con.execute method of the Dapper. So when we press step over, so that will execute, and then of course the method will end. So continue. So as you have noticed, nothing happens, but when we try to refresh the table, there will be Maria, Dara, Sakin, Wu. Now, of course, the problem of this program is the users will not be viewing the tables, of course. So we need to make sure that the values will be added here. So to do that, first we need to make sure that we have a store procedure for that. So we will go back here. We're just gonna recycle this as get all employees, and then oops, oh my god, and then we will delete all of this, and then so there will be no parameters, and then the select statement will be select asterisk from employee table. So that's it. Get all employees is the name of our store procedure. So after that, we have already a store procedure. We'll go back to our employee repo, and then we'll create another method. So the method will be public. It will not be void because it needs to return the select statement that will be executed here. So that will be public, and then list. So list of type employee. So basically, we need our method to return a list of employee. Then the name of the method, get all employees, no parameters. Oops. And then okay. So basically what this does is that when you call the get employees, it will return a list of employee. So list of employee, as I said, this is the method. So a list of this guy. So what we will do is that every method that requires a specific return type or a list of return type, we make sure that that method has a return statement. Return, and then this time we will put this .con, and then instead of execute, we will put query. So we need to make sure also that when we need to return the list of employees, we need to make sure that the query that we will be returning will be of type employee. And then open parenthesis, the name of our store procedure. So the name of the store procedure will be get all employees, and then comma command type, and then command type that store procedure. And then of course we need to make sure that the return type will be converted into list to list. So that's it. That's the execute and the query. So the next thing we will do is just implement this get all employees. So of course we will put that first on the load method, on the load, and as well as during the save. So what we will do is that we will just create a private method, void method, that will make sure that it will load employees. And then so what we're gonna do is just I'm gonna put the data grid view employee, which is this one. So what we'll do is we're just gonna clear the values inside this, and then we will add the values. So data grid view that employee that data source is equal to null, and then data, so that will clear the current values of the data grid. And then now we'll put repo emp repo that get all employees, which is this one. And then open parenthesis, close parenthesis. So that's it. So that's the method. So we will just gonna call this one for us not to be redundant. So we will put this method on our form load as well as the the after the adding of new employees. So after this one, after calling the add employee repo, we will also add the load employees and then the load employees. So we will just gonna put a comment that this method will return all the list of employees. What's up with me putting double S on employees? Okay, so so when we go to the get all employees, so basically go to definition, it will execute the get all employees. So to test, of course, we need to click start. So as you have noticed that it automatically puts the data here. Why? Because we put it on the form load. So on the form load, we call the load employees, which is this one. So it automatically calls this stored procedure. And then also, of course, it will call the also the get all when we try to add a new value or a new entry on the employee list. So Brian Brillantes, instructor, save. So if you have noticed, it first cleared the values within here and then reloads it again. So that's pretty much it. So basically the query, this execute method also can also perform the update and delete SQL queries. So your goal is to continue this application with an update functionality and a delete functionality. So it's up to you to design the whole project, but make sure that all the CRUD operations, including the insert, update, delete, and view functionalities are working well.